This is our last topic for the Romantic period, Romantic opera. Opera begins in the Baroque period with the Florentine Camerata, and at the end of that particular PowerPoint, that particular lecture, I discussed opera in viewpoints of three different countries, Italy, France, and England. Well, I'm going to talk about opera in terms of three different countries now in the Romantic period, Italy and France, but the English composers have experienced a drought, so to speak, and now the German and Austrian composers have come around. So we're going to take a look at the Italian, the French, and the German model. Let's start first with the French model. In the Baroque period, remember that the French were the ones that were not ruled by the language of music. And so instead of doing opera, serious opera in the Italian language, they came up with their own topic, the lyric tragedy. The lyric tragedy had to be this heroic adventure storyline that had lots of choral music, but also had to have a sumptuous dance scene. Well, dance music is synonymous with French opera. You always have to have some sort of ballet sequence within your French language opera. So the French, once we arrive in the Romantic period, they have their Baroque tradition, and then they're also looking back at classical music history at this point and are influenced in particular by one classic composer, and that's Mozart. They were able to see, especially in an opera like The Magic Flute by Mozart, that he was able to tell a serious story but have lighthearted moments spread throughout. So instead of there being a division between serious and comic opera, basically the French merged them all together and they create French grand opera. So it's going to be overall serious, but it's going to have a comedic character or a comedic scene somewhere, or maybe in a couple of different moments, the mood is going to be lightened, but it's still going to have its dance. The epitome composer from the Romantic period is Georges Bizet. Bizet, again, also had a tragic short life. He was known as composer and as an arranger throughout his lifetime, but he did not live to see how popular his next to last opera was going to be, and that opera is Carmen. The cigarette factory gypsy girl Carmen is seen in the very beginning, and everybody comes to listen to every single word that she says, and her entrance aria is the habanera, which is on your listening list. So this opera takes place in the city of Seville, Spain, and Carmen can command the attention of any man, but on this particular moment, when she's singing her entrance aria in the opera, there's one man who's not paying her any attention at all. And so eventually she's going to work her magic to gain his attention, and eventually he will become her husband. But then there's another man, a bullfighter, who also used to be one of Carmen's old flames, and he decides that he wants to come and get with her again. And so it's a typical love triangle that takes place in this particular opera. The Italian tradition does remember a lot about the Baroque. Remember, the Baroque period begins with the Florentine Camerata and the concept of word painting, so that the music was going to enhance the text wherever and whenever possible. But what happens in the Italian Baroque is that the castrati become so important and so sought after that people are just writing songs for the castrati to perform because greed takes over. So they're remembering in the Romantic period that the Italians love the voice, maybe so much more so than anything else, that it's okay to find just an all right story to set to music, but have these incredible vocal displays for the singers to achieve. But then there's another camp of thought that remembers the original Florentine Camerata, remembers the majority of the Mozart operas that were Italian languaged, that he was telling great stories. Remember the question from the Mozart biography video that Mozart was likened to Shakespeare as the first great musical dramatist. Well, that is true, and his Don Giovanni and his Così fan tutte all of these wonderful, The Marriage of Figaro, all these wonderful operas of Mozart, the characters sprung to life. And so now composers are going to be challenged to try and continue that idea. So there's two trains of thought, two camps of thought in the Italian Romantic opera tradition. Bel canto music, or beautiful singing. These composers are going to be very focused on writing beautiful, ornate, very difficult passages of music for the solo voice. Composers like Rossini, Bellini, and Donizetti achieved this. The other camp of thought is called verismo. Verismo literally means realism. And so people are trying to find stories that have scenes and incidents from everyday life, so that when you go to hear one of their operas, you can instantly relate to the saga of one of the characters, or you can instantly relate to one of the scenes that goes on in the opera. Therefore, you're going to feel connected to the storyline and want to go to the opera again and again. Two composers here, Giuseppe Verdi and Puccini. These composers all have great success with their particular model. Rossini, one of the bel canto composers, composes one of the most fantastic operas of all time, The Barber of Seville. There was a trilogy written about this character called Figaro, the Barber of Seville. The playwright was Beaumarchais, and the first installment is the introduction of Figaro, this Barber of Seville. The second play, about the marriage of Figaro, was the storyline that interested Mozart the most. And so Mozart set the second story to music. So that's always confusing to people that the trilogy is not written chronologically in music to opera. But the final one has also been set as an opera today called The Ghost of Versailles, where all the characters that you meet are now having their antics and playing tricks on people in the heavens. So Figaro is this wonderful figure in the field of opera, and you know his entrance aria where he sings about the fact that he's the jack of all trades. He's very sought after by people. He can always help them out with any problem that they're having, or if you need to get a love letter to a certain girl across town and you can't just go and deliver it yourself, well, then you can give it to Figaro and he can make sure that it lands in the proper hands. And so we meet him, and I want you to listen to his entrance aria from The Barber of Seville. Giuseppe Verdi, in addition to, this is the Verismo camp, in addition to his operas, he also composed a wonderful requiem. And so his music stands alone and as a great national composer from Italy. Even his name was associated with Italian battles. People used to shout "Viva Verdi," and Verdi stood for Italy. And you hear a lot of his music in his operas relaying times from Italy's past with reuses of folk songs and folk dances. Puccini has several big hits like La Bohème, which is the most often performed opera in the world. La Bohème has a similar story to Rent, if you've ever seen the movie or the musical Rent. His final opera, Turandot, is about this princess who feels that she is the reincarnation of an ancient princess who was raped. And so she holds hatred in her heart towards all men. And there's this wonderful scene where the lead hero of the storyline falls instantly in love with the beautiful Princess Turandot. And so he accepts her challenge. And her challenge is that she will accept a suitor, she will date a suitor or marry a suitor if they're able to answer 3 riddles that she gives them. And so a lot of people have tried, and if you lose, you're beheaded, you're executed. But the hero takes up the challenge and answers the riddles, and then she becomes a very sore loser, and the story goes on from there. So there's a lot of wonderful storylines set to music by these composers. But I wanted to take a look at the German tradition and focus primarily in this opera lecture on one particular composer. The German tradition from the Baroque doesn't really have a representative other than Handel. Handel was German by birth, but all of his operas were composed for the London public, and they were all serious operas in the language of Italian. So the first German-languaged opera comes from Mozart again. Mozart composed 3 Singspiels in his life. Well, the Magic Flute and the Abduction from the Seraglio and Zaida are all things that are going to influence these other composers to come. The next person following Mozart is Beethoven. Beethoven did write 1 German opera, and this is Fidelio. The differences that Beethoven brings to the table is, again, Beethoven was our deaf composer, and so he's writing Fidelio at the end of his Romantic period when he is, for all practical purposes, deaf. And so he's writing with a bigger orchestra. Well, the normal human voice cannot be heard over 40 or 50 instruments blaring a forte. So eventually, Beethoven decided that he was going to have 2 primary characters who needed to be dramatic. So their voices needed to be huge and big so that they could be heard over that many instruments. But for the other characters, he would back off the instrumental numbers or keep them at a lower dynamic level so that their voices could be heard. This is going to be interesting for later on. So now we move into the full-blown Romantic period, and a composer that follows suit with this is Carl Maria von Weber. Von Weber wrote several different operas, but I wanted to talk just a minute about Der Freischütz. Der Freischütz is about a storyline where there's 2 guys who are best friends, and they're both in love with the same girl. So eventually they challenge each other to a duel to win her hand in marriage. One of them is a champion hunter, but the other one is not. The one that is not is the hero of the storyline. His name is Max. And Max is wandering at midnight around the city trying to figure out what he's going to do because he knows his friend will kill him because he's the champion marksman. When he's wandering around, he finds himself in a cemetery, and this evil character called Zamiel comes out from behind one of the mausoleums and says, "I can help you out, Max. Here's a magic gun and 6 silver bullets. All you have to do is fire your gun and think about the target that you want the bullet to hit." Well, the gift given by the evil character Zamiel is Zamiel's eventual undoing. Max does win the duel and win Abigail's hand in marriage, but then you can't accept help from the devil without giving the devil his due. So Zamiel comes back after Max and says, "I see that you're successful. Here's what you need to do for me. I want you to kill Abigail because I'm in love with her as well, and I want her spirit to come be with mine." So Max runs and is very frightened and doesn't know what to do until he remembers he's the one that has the gun. So he fires the last bullet over his head, thinking about the target being Zamiel. So the gift kills Zamiel. This is echoing the storyline of the Magic Flute, where the Queen of the Night gave the Magic Flute to Tamino. Tamino uses it to gain admittance to the band of priests by negotiating the final 2 trials. So we have a lot of stories in the German tradition of operas that have similar ideas and consistency to it. But then that leads us into Richard Wagner, and I want to spend a little bit of time with this composer.